Hello, my name is Tracy Knapp. I'm the Occupational Health Wellbeing Lead for Balfour Beatty Vinci. We are launching a gambling campaign. Today we have Peter Shilton with us. Welcome, Peter.
Yeah, good morning.
It's a pleasure to have you here. You've got lived experience of a gambling addiction.
Yeah, very much so, I'm afraid. I think it was about 45 years all in. Obviously started very young and, it just carried on really. I think it was, the odd little bet here and there, to start with. And I had a love of horse racing, so I kind of used to follow the horses and eventually owned a few later on in my career. But it is something that's very difficult to understand when you're actually in the middle of it. It's an illness really, and I didn't realise I got this illness until I met my present wife.
So you're a former professional
Yes.
footballer, played as goalkeeper?
Played as goalkeeper, 30-year career, played for England for 20 years, 3 World Cups, in 82, 86 and 90. In particular, the 90 was very good memories, although we lost in the penalties in the semi-final, so near yet so far. And won 2 European Cups, now the Champions League with Nottingham Forest. So, I was reasonably happy with my career.
And last year you were presented with a CBE?
CBE, yeah. Went to Windsor, Prince William, which was a great day, and it was for work with gambling harm and a bit of football. I think when Prince William came over, I thought he was going to, talk to me about football because he's a massive football fan, and the first thing he says, I believe you've been working very hard on gambling harm, which was really good to hear. So I was very proud about that.
So what are your earliest experiences of gambling?
Well, I think there's different reasons why people start gambling. I think, sometimes it can be one instance, that they have a big win or they see somebody have a big win. Sometimes that it can be learned experience, In my case, although my father wasn't a big gambler, I mean, we weren't sort of a rich family, and he worked very hard as a greengrocer, in the sort of 60s, 70s era. And I remember we used to go to Mablethorpe on the East Coast for our holidays in a caravan. And before we went, unbeknownst to me, my father had been given 6 horses to follow by some person that comes into his shop. So you think, oh, here we go, somebody's trying to get a free load of groceries. And my dad, being my dad, said, oh, I'm going to have a bet on. And the first one won, and then the second one won. And it came to the point where, he was going to have a £10 each way on the last one because he'd got quite a few winnings. And we actually went in the amusement arcade with my mum, me and my younger brother, while my dad put the bet on. And we're in this arcade, and all I can remember is him silhouetted. It was a lovely day, silhouetted in the entrance with his arms in the air. And this horse had won at 12-1, £10 each way, which I say it was a lot of money. He gave it to my mum, thankfully, my dad did. But it's that sort of image that think, oh yeah, it must be great to have a big win. And I think that's, what drives people on who gamble. They want that big win, and they dream of that big win.
So with your gambling addiction, it was always about chasing the win?
Yeah, I used to say it was my hobby.
Okay.
I used to get away with it as my hobby. I'd play football. Nothing would interfere with my football. But I used to look on it initially as a hobby. I'd stop the event, and have a few bets. This is in an era where you haven't got phones, iPhones, and you got a casino in your pocket these days. But you'd have to go down the bookmakers, or you could use a landline, and maybe open an account with a bookmaker. So it was totally different. But you could still, get bets on. There's no problem. It's a bit more difficult. And I used to pop in basically into a bookmaker. And then I thought, maybe I should open an account. So in the afternoons in between games, I'd rest, because that's what you're supposed to do if you're getting 2 games a week. And I would sit on the phone and start gambling, which looking back, was the worst thing I could have done. And I'm thinking I'm relaxing, I'm getting ready for the next game, but I'm also giving me something to occupy my mind. You know, you'd be far better off reading or doing something like that. And that was the start of the addiction as far as I was concerned, you know, because you could have a bad afternoon, you know, and you chase it. And then at the end of the day, you think, crikey, I can't believe I've lost all that. I did have a few wins, but I wasn't winning because at Christmas, each bookmaker was Corals, Ladbrokes and William Hill, basically. I mean, these days there's hundreds. And they used to send me a big hamper. And I used to say, you know, oh, you know, it's just great of them, very nice of them. And then somebody says, yeah, but they only send that to people who lose. And I suddenly realised, yeah, you know, it's, I am losing all the time. But you keep going, you keep chasing that win. And I kept thinking, look, you know, it's a hobby. But it wasn't, it was an addiction.
And it gets you hooked quite quickly.
It does get you hooked quite quickly. You've got to be very careful, you know, and it is a silent addiction. People only tell you about when they win, you know, they don't tell you about when they lose. And yeah, it's something that builds up on you and you don't like to admit it, really. And I was in that, you know, that stage where I, you know, although I knew I wasn't winning, I felt as though, I've made an excuse for myself, you know, it's a hobby and I will win, you know, etc.
So when did you first realise it was becoming a problem?
I think, you know, quite a few years ago, people would say to me, Pete, you know, people around me would say, you know, you're gambling too much, you know, and you just say, no, I'm not, you know, I'm earning. See, money fuels gambling. You know, if you've got a weekly wage coming in, you'll probably feel, oh yeah, I can spend that before I actually get it, and that's the worst thing you can do. And obviously I was earning quite a bit of money, so I just said, oh, don't worry, I'll get it back, you know, and I used to play games with my mind, you know, to allow me to bet. I used to make excuses. Oh, I've got this, or, you know, I'm going to earn that, and etc. And the thing is, money fuels the habit. You know, once that supply's taken off, that is, you know, where people have a chance of giving up.
So how did gambling impact relationships, people around you, Peter, over the years?
Yeah, it definitely does, because gambling is, you know, you're very lonely in the sense, you know, you shut yourself off from people because you don't want to, you know, to tell people that you're gambling, but also the fact that you're gambling, your mind's only on the gambling. So you lose relationships sometimes, you know, you don't meet people or see people as often as you would do, you know, it causes problems in areas, and yeah, that's basically what a gambler has. They're really in their own world, and they can lose relationships.
So you mentioned when you were playing football, you had quite a bit of downtime, and that's when you used to look at the form, look at the racing post.
Yeah.
So in construction on this project, we have a lot of people that work away from home, and they'll have a lot of downtime in the evenings. Do you think that could increase the risk of people becoming addicted to gambling using their technology?
Yeah, like I say, with the phones these days, you know, you've got a casino in your pocket. You can bet on so many more things as well than when I started gambling. I mean, mine was just horse racing. I wasn't, occasionally a little bit roulette. We go to, you know, casino, and it was like more for a meal than anything else. But no, I think, you know, I was studying the form. Like I say, I owned horses, but there's so many other things now that people can bet. I mean, you know, table tennis on the other side of the world. And, you know, people will bet on that because, you know, if they start losing, they don't like to stop, you know, on a particular day. And especially if you're on your own and you're in a room, just get the phone out, or I'll have a few bets, you know. And before you know what's happened, you know, you've maybe lost your weekly wages. And some people can have a couple of bets and finish, you know. But I think generally most people who gamble probably lose more than they should do. I think I know that, yeah.
So you've already mentioned your wife, Steph. So do you think that was a key moment in your gambling history? Was Steph speaking to you made you understand, actually, this is an illness and I need to look at it in a different perspective?
Definitely. I think, Steph was a massive part of it. I think I was getting to a time when I thought, look, what are you doing? She made me realise, look at myself, what are you doing? You're a certain age and you're still gambling and you've not really ever won. It's just cost you money. But, she made me realise that basically, you never win. And also, she wasn't happy with, spending time in that area. And it did make me think. And I also feel that I was at that point where I'm thinking, what am I doing with my life? What you do is you waste a lot of time when you're gambling. It's time consuming. You lose a lot of friendships and relationships by it. You make yourself moody. You feel uptight. And if I wouldn't go out on the football pitch and gamble, but I know people gamble at work who've got that. I haven't got that sort of, I'm playing in front of 40,000 people. I can't have a phone in the back of my goal. But if you're at work, you can have a few bets and it takes over. So your concentration would go. So I could switch off, I'd go training, switch off, do my job properly, come back, relax. And then I'd have 2 or 3 hours where I could gamble, But then if I'd got a match, I'd leave a bet maybe in the morning later on because, you could do that. And afterwards, when I got home, I could watch the replay. But it wouldn't be a lot. It'd probably be just one. But I wouldn't take it onto the pitch with me, totally the opposite, really. And I think that's what happens,
How difficult was it for you to realise you needed to stop, and to actually that journey to stop? How difficult was it?
It was difficult. I'm not gonna lie. And once you stop, I'll explain how I stopped. But once you stop, it's an ongoing situation. You've got to, you've got to be well aware. You've got to believe in your mind that you're doing the right thing for yourself in the long run. And when I stopped, I realised that a weight was off my shoulders. I wasn't looking to spend time gambling. I wanted to, at the end of whatever every month, I was get money in. I wasn't losing. I was building, and it's a totally different scenario. You feel much better in yourself. I was getting to a point where, Steph in herself was dropping little hints. She wasn't happy. I used to live in the Midlands and then drive down at weekends. Steph was working every day, and we'd have a good sort of Friday night out and Saturday night out. And we go for Saturday lunch to start with. And of course, the racing was on in the afternoon, and I'd be getting irritable about 1 o'clock, and she could notice that. And as we went on, and she was saying things to me like, I used to have the Racing Post in the morning, and she'd say, "Is that the Losing Post again?" She'd be dropping hints everywhere, and then she started to, let me know that, she wouldn't think of a long-term relationship, with the situation I was in. I was still earning good money, I'd got a football pension and all that, that I had when I was 35, so it's quite substantial. But it was the fact that she wasn't, she didn't want to live basically with a gambler. But that just opened my eyes, made me realise what I was doing with my life, And I remember this one weekend, I'd had a not a good Saturday, and I was owed some money by an agent, and I had a bit short on the cash flow until something came in. And I'd sneaked upstairs on the Sunday morning, got my phone, phoned this agent and said, "Look, could you pay me that money you owe me tomorrow, and I'll give you a drink out of it, I'll give you a bit of money out of it, so it's worth your while." And of course he said, "Yeah, no problem, Peter." He'd done it before, And I'd looked round and Steph was stood behind me, and I looked in the mirror and she's there, and she just walked away, And I suddenly realised, what are you doing, Yeah, I think I realised, I've got to have the willpower to stop. It's down to me, but I needed help, and Steph obviously helped me. Now, some other people might need to go in a different area, but you can go to a national gambling helpline. I mean, my wife does therapy now, and she's got her own company now called Silver Linings. And I think there's another company called Lighthouse, but there's a lot of companies where you can get, or charities I should say, you can get help. And I think it's a good thing to go to them, because it's not easy for an ordinary person to just say I've quit and that's it.
No.
And I think the effect it has if you've got a family, they're the ones that suffer, because the money runs short, or you get moody because you've not had a good day and all that, and it affects the people around you.
So support is key. Once you realise you've got that addiction and you think I need help, like you've mentioned national gambling, we've got GamCare, we've got the Lighthouse charity, but your wife Steph, the Silver Lining, Steph actually does a lot of work to help families living with an addict with gambling. Exactly, because once the addict gets treatment, the family are left with a lot of the debris of it, because they've had mentally been not happy, financially things might have not been very good. There's a lot of things that happen with a gambler, and Steph is brilliant, because if a gambler say goes into treatment, which is the best thing, because you can really get to understand that it's an illness. It's nothing to be ashamed of. But I think then the family members, in a way, need to be re-educating themselves, because they probably think he's a right, so and so, and we've got financial problems and all that. Well, you can't have an addict coming out of treatment and walking into the same problems. Yeah. And it is, one goes with the other. So you can't have one without the other. And I think that's very important, that when, people come out of treatment, addiction, then they walk into a better atmosphere and a better understanding. And that's brilliant, the work that Steph's done. When you made the decision to stop gambling, how did that make you feel as the days went into weeks? What were you thinking? What were you feeling inside? Yeah, I mean, that decision, was only part of stopping gambling, because obviously you make that decision, and then, I know of quite a few gamblers who, a week or so later, they sort of succumb to it, because there are triggers, there are things not easy to give up, because you've got advertising thrown in your face all the time, things pop up on your phone, and that's all enticing people back into go. So it's not easy, it's something that I think you do need treatment for. That would be a good thing, to try and get some help in some ways. We've talked about that, but that is the first stage, really. To be open and to actually say, I've got a problem here. I really am struggling. I'm losing a lot of money. I'm borrowing off people. Now, I'm not strong enough I don't think I'm strong enough. And what you've got to realise is in your head that it's when you make that decision, it's the start of the best day of your life and going forward, because you're going to be free. You're going to have money in your bank every day. There's no way that you're any worse off, but you get a false sense with gambling, of excitement. That's what gamblers want. They want excitement. They want to, have that win, that excitement. By the nature of gambling, you're going to go back to it, and the long term, you're going to lose money. There's no doubt. Any gambler tells you he's not lost money. There's very few, far between. That's why there's more and more gambling companies with more and more profits and that sort of thing. That's the biggest thing. I mean, from my point of view, because obviously being well known internationally, not only nationally, I had to come out publicly. Once I'd made my mind up to stop between me and Steph, I had to come out publicly, I felt. And, as many people are doing. Me and Steph said we're not actually against gambling. We're against the amount of advertising. People have got a problem.
you know, should be noticed and in a sense given help to, you know, to overcome that, because it is an illness.
So if any of our colleagues are watching this and feel that they are at that juncture where they think, well, if Peter Shilton can openly talk about his gambling addiction, what do I need to do? They need to be brave and courageous and speak to somebody and be open and honest. But in your opinion, and I agree with you, they do need some professional support with this.
Oh, definitely. I mean, you know, I see so many people say, oh, yeah, you know, I've given up, you know, and they say a week later, you know, the temptation's there, the trigger's there. It might be an advert, it might be a bit racing, like, you know, maybe the derby's coming up and they want to think, oh, I'll have a bet on the derby. So there'll be a reason why they'll make a reason why they're going to get back into it. So you do need that time to sort of reflect. So I think, you know, if you get help, and we've mentioned different places, you know, it's just a matter of being brave enough to realise that you need help.
So if somebody contacted a professional organisation, charity, contacted Steph's website, Silver Lining,
Yeah.
because they're ready to openly say, I've got a problem with gambling, how do you think they're going to be received when they make that call?
Well, that'd be welcome, because, you know, there are an awful lot of people who realise what a you know, terrible addiction it is. And please, to anybody, don't feel that way. You know, it is an illness. You know, you're ill, and you know, it's like any illness. You need treatment. Money feeds the habit. You must realise that. But get help. You know, speak to somebody. You'll be well received. There won't be any guilt or stigma. The sooner you make that decision, the better you are. Any person, I'll just say, make that decision. Stop. Get help. And the worst thing you can do is go to an addict. You're an idiot. You're betting. You're losing loads of money, because you know that's not what the addict wants to hear. You know.
Thank you, Peter. That's fantastic.
Pleasure.
Thank you.